ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात्। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति। Namaskar my dear friends, this is sixth video on the life and teachings of Swami Brahmananda, who was dearly called Maharaj and his prehistoric name was Rakhal. It is already mentioned that how Sri Ramakrishna saw Rakhal dancing with Sri Krishna on a mystic lotus shortly before the boy's first visit to Dakshineshwar. Only a few intimate disciples knew of this vision, and Sri Ramakrishna had warned them never to reveal it to Maharaj, explaining that if he realized his true nature as the eternal companion of Krishna, he would leave his mortal body. The secret had therefore been very carefully guarded. In March 1922, Maharaj went to Calcutta to stay for a while at the home of Balram. Balram himself had already passed away, but his whole family were sincere devotees of Ramakrishna, and his beautiful guest house was always at the disposal of all the Swamis and disciples of the order. It is now regarded as a place of pilgrimage, sanctified by the presence of so many holy men. While Maharaj was staying at the guest house, Ramlal Dada came to visit him. Ramlal Dada was a pure soul and devotee of a very high order. During Ramakrishna's lifetime, he had been one of the master's personal attendants and had served him with great devotion. Whenever he and Maharaj were together, their talk naturally turned to the early days. They would laugh and joke together, for they stimulated each other's sense of fun. One day Maharaj asked Ramlal Dada to sing for him the songs he used to sing to Ramakrishna. It was arranged that many disciples and devotees should be present to hear the singing. Ramlal Dada began to sing songs about Krishna and the shepherd and shepherdesses of Vrindavan. At first, everyone was very gay as Ramlal mimicked the gestures of the shepherdesses, making his audience laugh. Suddenly Maharaj, who had also been enjoying the fun, became serious. Ramlal Dada was singing, "Come back, O Krishna, come back to Vrindavan. Come and reign in the hearts of your beloved shepherds and shepherdesses. Do not forget that you are a shepherd yourself." At that moment, Maharaj seemed transported to a realm beyond this earth. The joking and laughter stopped. The atmosphere became calm and serene. It may be that at this moment Maharaj got a partial glimpse of his true nature and knew himself to be God's eternal companion. The events that followed seem to point to some such revelation. The events that followed seem to point to some such revelation. A few days later, at midnight, Nirvanananda, a disciple and personal attendant of Maharaj, saw his master singing on his bed in a very earnest mood. The disciple stood silently before him, waiting for him to speak. Maharaj looked at him and said, I woke suddenly and saw Sri Ramakrishna standing just there. He pointed to a spot in front of a couch, adding, He did not speak to me. He stood there silently for a while and then disappeared. I don't understand it. After a few moments, Maharaj continued in a low, earnest voice, I cannot give my mind to the things of this world any longer. It wants to take complete refuge in him and him alone. Shortly after this, the birthday of Sri Ramakrishna was celebrated. Maharaj stayed at the Belur Mutt for the occasion. Then he returned to Balram's house in Calcutta. 2 days later, he had a slight attack of cholera but recovered within a week. This illness, which left him feeble, was followed by diabetes, which took a serious turn. Many doctors came to treat him, one of whom bore the religious mark on his forehead. Doctor said, Maharaj, the Lord Shiva, whose symbol you wear on your forehead, is the only reality, everything else is unreal. A devotee asked Maharaj, are you suffering very greatly? Please try to realize, Maharaj answered, that in my condition I have to bear all physical suffering patiently and without complaint. But as he said this, his face lighted up with a divine radiance. The pain seemed to have melted. While speaking of the divine expenses, his throat became dry. A disciple offered him a drink, saying, Maharaj, please drink this water, it has lemon in it. The mind doesn't want to come down from Brahma, said Maharaj slowly. Pour Brahma into Brahma, and like a child he opened his mouth for the water to be poured into it. Then he turned to Swami Shardananda and said, Brother, Sri Ramakrishna is real. His divine incarnation is real. After this, Maharaj was silent for a while. He was deeply absorbed in meditation and his face bore an expression of great sweetness. The minds of those who were present were so uplifted that they felt no grief, only joy and silent calm. All sense of the world and of death was lost. Suddenly, out of the silence, the voice of Maharaj was heard. Ah, that inexpressible light, Ramakrishna, the Krishna of my Ramakrishna. I am the shepherd boy. Put anklets on my feet. I want to dance with Krishna. I want to hold his hand. The little boy Krishna, ah Krishna, my Krishna, you have come. Krishna, Krishna. Can't you see him? Have not you eyes to see? Oh, how beautiful my Krishna on the lotus, eternal, the sweet one. My play is over now, look. The child is caressing me. He is calling me to come away with him. I am coming. The tenderness and heavenly compassion that filled his heart were expressed in every word he uttered. The whole atmosphere of the large hall where he was lying seemed to vibrate with this emotion. No one can describe the extraordinary sense of holiness which was created by his presence. Everyone knew that the fateful hour was approaching and that Maharaj was taking his final leave. During the early hours of the morning, he remained silent for some time and fell into a slumber. At 7 o'clock he awoke and was again possessed by this high spiritual mood. He called the few disciples who had just arrived but who had not been present the previous night. To each he gave his blessing, bestowing comfort and fearlessness. 2 more days passed, and another night came on. By this time his life was departed off, and gloom fell upon all his physical. By this time his life was despaired of, and gloom fell upon all his physical condition, grew worse and worse, and the doctors were amazed that he had not passed into coma days before, as is usual with this kind of illness. But so great was the power and spirituality of his mind, so completely was it freed from the message of physical matter that it remained completely unaffected by the condition of his suffering body. He maintained perfect consciousness right up to the last moment of his life. As that last evening faded into night, his chest suddenly heaved. It was as if a great wave of breath passed up the body to the throat. His half-closed eyes opened and he gazed into the distance, his eyes shining with a brilliance and unspeakable beauty. Thus it was that on April 10th, 1922, the life left his body. Do not grieve, I shall be with you always. Those were his last words to his disciples. After his passing away, we all had the feeling that Maharaj was intensely present within us. He was closer to us than ever before. More than 20 years have passed since that day, and even disciple can bear witness, and every disciple can bear witness to the fact that Maharaj still lives, protects and guides him onward towards the goal. When I was about to leave India and take up my duties in the United States, Swami Shivananda said to me, "Never forget that you have seen the Son of God, you have seen God." Now starts the spiritual teachings of Swami Brahmananda, who was dearly called Maharaj. It was the afternoon of a beautiful spring day in March 1916 when a young Indian girl came to the monastery to see Swami Brahmananda, the president of the Ramakrishna Mission. Forced into marriage by her parents, she had run away from her husband to the monastery, and as soon as she was brought into the presence of Maharaj, she fell at his feet, saying, "O Father, I have no desire to live a worldly life. I wish only to spend my days here at the monastery under your guidance. My one desire is to worship God and realize Him. To Him alone I would surrender myself, body, mind and soul." Deeply touched by her evident earnestness and zealousness of character, Maharaj replied, "My child, this is a monastery. How can you stay here? Go back to your parents. They are worried about you. Stay with them, study the scriptures and read the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda. Pray to Sri Ramakrishna. He knows the yearnings of your heart and will answer your prayers. Later on, you may go to the Nivedita School for Girls, or to the ashrama of Gaurima, you have the true understanding. When indeed is this human birth unless one has love for God? But the young girl refused to return to her returned to her parents. Sri Ramakrishna saw God in all beings, seeing his great love for his disciples. Swami Vivekananda once said to him, you love us all so much. Is it not possible that because of this love, you too may meet the same fate that Jada Bharat met? The master replied, true, by thinking of matter, one becomes like matter. But you must understand that it is the God within you that I love. If my mind should ever become attached to any one of you as man or woman, I would at once dismiss all thought of you from my mind. Because Sri Ramakrishna taught the ideal of renunciation to his young disciples, he was often criticized by the worldly minded, and to such criticism he would answer, I have no objection to anyone living in the world. Neither do I teach that every man and woman should renounce lust and greed. I teach renunciation only to those in whom there is already some spiritual awakening. I want these young men to attain first knowledge and discrimination, and then, if they wish, they may enter into worldly life. Indeed, to many who came to him, he would say, first go out into the world. Referring to the story in the Bhagavatam, Wisdom of God, which tells of the king who loved his pet deer so intensely that after his death he himself was reborn as a deer. The moral of the story is, as you think, so you become. Therefore, one should not become attached to any object in the world. So that girl did not came back to her parents' home, so Maharaj blessed her and sent her to the ashram. After she had left, Maharaj walked slowly into the library where he found Swami Premananda writing a letter. He sat down beside him and almost immediately went into a mood of ecstasy. Those who watched him could catch only a glimpse of ecstatic joy which shone through his radiant face. His expression and behavior were indescribable. Swami Premananda watched him for a while, then turning to the young monk who was also present said, watch Maharaj, that mood in which you see him is known as the Paramahansa state. In a little while, Maharaj returned to normal consciousness and said to Swami Premananda, who can understand the divine play of Sri Ramakrishna? Swami Vivekananda wanted to see a convent established for young women, and now I see that someday soon his desire will be fulfilled. Young women are becoming imbued with the ideal of renunciation as taught by our master. That girl who came today was like a goddess in her beauty, her purity, her earnestness, and her guilelessness. Maharaj, how did Sri Ramakrishna look upon mankind? Please tell us something about him. A disciple is asking this. Maharaj is replying, Sri Ramakrishna saw God in all beings, seeing his great love for his disciples. Swami Vivekananda once said to him, You love us all so much. Is it not possible that because of this love, you too may meet the same fate that Jada Bharta met? The master replied, true, by thinking of matter. This is repeated, that is repetition. So gather your experience, and then when you have become sick of the world, come to me for the cure. Its teachings vary to suit all temperaments. When Swami Turyananda was quite a young lad, he asked Sri Ramakrishna how he could give up thoughts of lust. The master said, give up lust. Why should you give up lust? Instead of trying to give up, you should increase your lust. This advice amazed the young disciple, but he said nothing, and the master continued. Direct all your thoughts of lust and all your passions towards God. Often he would point to himself and say, everything will be achieved if you will love this. The more intensely you yearn for God, the greater will be your revelation of Him. Sri Ramakrishna was many-sided. Whenever he talked about the intuitive knowledge of the Godhead, he would talk as one who was a pure Jnani, knower of God, and whenever he talked about love and devotion, he talked as a pure lover and devotee of God. He impressed upon us very clearly that mere secular knowledge is nothing but vanity, and that one should struggle hard to attain spiritual knowledge and love and devotion to God alone. Please tell us something about Master's Samadhi, disciple is asking. Now Maharaj replies, the master used to experience many different kinds of samadhi. In some states, his body would become stiff and motionless, like a log. It was easy for him to regain his normal consciousness from such a state, but at other times, when the samadhi was deeper, it would take him much longer to return to normal consciousness. At such times, he would first draw a deep breath like a drowning man coming up out of deep water. Then for a while he would reel and act like a drunken man. Even his speech would be thick and incoherent. Gradually, however, he would regain his natural state. Whenever you teach and give lectures, quote the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna. His words throw a clear light on the scriptures and help to bring home the true import of their meaning. Insincerity was the only one thing Sri Ramakrishna could not stand. He loved those who loved God sincerely. He used to say, if a man prays to God with a sincere heart, he is quickly freed from all impurities. Most of the master's nights were spent in samadhi, or in chanting the Lord's name, or in singing his praise. He seldom slept for more than an hour any night. Often I have seen him completely absorbed in samadhi for more than an hour at a time. Sometimes he would try to speak to us, but no words would come. Later he would say, you see, I want to talk to you while I am in samadhi, but whenever I try to do so, it seems as if the doors of my speech are locked. Many times, as he was coming down to the normal plane, he would be muttering as though talking to an unseen being. He used to say, to find God you must yearn for Him, and he would tell the story. An aspirant approached his teacher and asked to be shown the way to the attainment of God. The teacher took the disciple by the hand and led him to the river there without a word. He held the disciple's head under the water for some time. After a while he let go, and the disciple came up choking and gasping for breath. He looked at his teacher in astonishment, and the teacher smiled at him and said, "Well, how did it feel?" The disciple answered, "I felt an intense longing for air." "Well," said the teacher, "when you can long for God with the same intensity as you longed for that breath of air, you will surely attain Him." When Swami Vivekananda first came to Sri Ramakrishna as a young man, he would often argue with him. At that time, Swami believed only in the formless aspect of God and even told Sri Ramakrishna that he considered his visions of God as mere hallucinations of the brain. He would also scold the devotees when they went to bow down to the deities in the temple. This attitude annoyed many of the master's disciples, but the master himself was not disturbed. He could never be angry with Naren. He would say, "Naren is unique. There is none to equal him." Later on, he gave Swamiji the vision of God in all his aspects, so that he too came to say, "Devote ourselves to God, whether with form or without form, and you will reach Him." Disciple. Maharaj, many people are of the opinion that those who met Sri Ramakrishna did not need to struggle to find God. To know Him was quite sufficient. Even the great devotee Ramdatta had this view. Maharaj. Disciple asking, "Maharaj, many people are of the opinion that those who met Sri Ramakrishna did not need to struggle to find God. To know Him was quite sufficient. Even the great devotee Ramdatta held this view." Maharaj replied, "Ramdatta was unique. He had a true faith, a faith which grew in intensity and which lasted all his life. Few have such faith. With the majority, it is merely lip faith." Disciple. Maharaj, many devotees who have seen the Holy Mother and have served holy men think it is not necessary for them to continue their spiritual struggles. Maharaj. Merely to see the Holy Mother and to serve holy men is not enough. It is most necessary to practice renunciation and discrimination and to live a contemplative life. Maharaj. The one purpose of human life is to attain devotion to God and spiritual illumination. Otherwise, life is vain and meaningless. Dating, drinking, sleeping, and procreating are not the sole ends of human birth. These belong to the brutes. God is greatly manifest in the human body. Try to understand this truth. Swamiji gave his heart's blood to build this monastery so that you young men might have the opportunity to devote your lives to God and practice spiritual disciplines. In fact, in his effort to make your life easier, he overexerted himself and shortened his own life. What intense love he had towards all mankind. Sri Ramakrishna was revealed to the world at large through Swamiji. Know that their words and teachings are not different. Sri Ramakrishna was too great for the average mind to grasp. It was Swami Vivekananda who made his life and teachings understandable to all. Study Swamiji's works carefully, for unless you understand his teachings, it is useless to try to understand Sri Ramakrishna. Read and study the teachings of both, and at the same time devote yourself to the practice of japam and meditation. You are young now, and these are the best years of your life. Mold your minds now. Once the mind is molded, there is nothing to fear. When you can bring the mind under control, you will have achieved much. Whip it whenever it tries to run away. Maharaj, hold fast to the lotus feet of the Lord. Remember Him constantly. Do not waste any more time in worldly thoughts. Struggle hard to control the outgoing mind and fix it on God. When you can do this, you will realize what joy there is in spiritual life, what fun it. First, ignorance must be overcome in this very life. I will repeat it once more. Hold fast to the lotus feet of the Lord. Remember Him constantly. Do not waste any more time in worldly thoughts. Struggle hard to control the outgoing mind and fix it on God. When you can do this, you will realize what joy there is in spiritual life, what fun. First, ignorance must be overcome in this very life. This will not be easy unless you can devote yourself wholeheartedly to the work of the Spirit. Faith is the one thing needed, intense faith. Let not doubts get hold of your mind. The word fun as applied to spiritual joy was characteristics of Swami Brahmananda, who wished by its use to do away with the chasm which exists in many minds between the high satisfaction of religion and the moods of simple happiness experienced in everyday life. Everyone likes fun. Why then should everyone not like God? For God, when all is said, is the real and only fun. Disciple, but if doubts should come, Maharaj replied, doubts will come until you have realized God. Therefore, you must hold fast to God and pray. Think to yourself, God first, but because of the impurities of mind, I cannot see Him. When my heart and mind have become purified, then through His grace I shall surely see Him. God cannot be known by the finite mind. He is beyond the mind and far beyond the intellect. Thus, apparent universe is a creation of the mind. The mind has continued it up, conjured up it, and it is its author, and the mind cannot go beyond its own domain. Behind this mind of ours, there is a subtle spiritual mind existing in seed form. Through the practice of contemplation, prayer and japam, This mind is developed, and with this development, a new vision opens up, and the aspirant realizes many spiritual truths. This, however, is not the final experience. The subtle mind leads the aspirant nearer to God, but it cannot reach God, the Supreme Atma. Having reached this stage, the world no longer holds any charm for the aspirant. He becomes absorbed in the consciousness of God. This absorption leads to samadhi, an experience which cannot be described. It is beyond. It is beyond and is not there. There is neither happiness nor misery, neither light nor darkness. All is infinite being, inexpressible. Disciple: Maharaj, how should we perform our worldly duties? Maharaj replied, do your duties consciously. Do your duties conscientiously and without attachment. Always remember that you are only an instrument in the hands of God, and that God Himself is the only doer. Keep your mind fixed in God. It is not always easy to keep the mind steady in God while working. The ego creeps in, but never be discouraged by your failures. Repeated failures is inevitable in the beginning, but keep your faith and redouble your efforts. Try hard to live up to your ideal. Let your watchword be, I must realize God in this very life. After all, what is the use of this body and this mind if they do not help you to realize God? Do or die. What does it matter even if you die in the attempt? Disciple: Maharaj, what is the significance of all these gods and goddesses? Do they really exist? And what is the meaning and purpose of ritualistic worship? Maharaj replies, the many gods and goddesses represent but so many different aspects of the one Godhead. Men differ in their temperaments and so are inclined to different ways of worship. To meet the needs of all, the scriptures prescribe 4 distinct methods of worship. One method is the ritualistic worship of God, embodied in an image or symbol. Higher than this is the worship of God with prayer and japam. By this means the aspirant prays and chants and meditates upon the shining form of his chosen ideal within his own heart. Higher still is meditation. When a man practices this form of worship, he keeps up a constant flow of thoughts towards God and becomes absorbed in the living presence of his chosen ideal. He goes beyond prayer and japam, but the sense of duality remains. The highest method of worship is meditation on the unity of the Atma and Brahma. This leads directly and immediately to God. The aspirant experiences Brahma. He knows that God is, it is an actual realization of the omnipresent reality. These are the different stages through which the aspirant progresses. It is of vital importance that a man begin his spiritual journey from where he is. If an average man is instructed to meditate on his union with the absolute Brahma, he will not understand. He will neither grasp the truth of it nor be able to follow the instruction. For a while he may try, but sooner or later he will tire of the struggle and give up. However, if that same man is asked to worship God with flowers, incense, and other accessories of the ritualistic worship, his mind will gradually become concentrated on God and he will find joy in his worship. Through such worship, devotion to the performance of japam grows. The finer the mind becomes, the greater is its capacity for the higher forms of worship. Through japam, the mind inclines toward meditation. Thus, the aspirant gradually and naturally moves towards his ideal. Take the illustration of a man standing in the courtyard of a house. He wants to reach the roof, but instead of climbing the staircase step by step, he permits himself to be thrown up bodily. What happens? He is seriously hurt. So it is with the spiritual life. One should follow the gradual path, for just as there are laws governing the physical world, so are there laws governing the spiritual world also. Disciple asking, how may I check a distracting thought that persistently arises in my mind? Maharaj reply, think to yourself, this thought is immensely harmful to me. It will be my ruin. Impress the idea again and again upon your mind. The mind is extremely susceptible to suggestions and will learn whatever you teach it. Therefore, if through discrimination you can impress upon it the joy and fullness of the spiritual life and the folly of worldly attachments, it will devote itself more and more to God, and you will find yourself freed from all distracting thoughts. The supreme ideal of the human life is to know God. Everyone must have an ideal firmly established in his life, and that ideal must never be lowered. He who is smaller than the smallest, greater than the greatest, shines forth always and everywhere. He dwells within all beings, great and small. He dwells in the plants and herbs. He dwells everywhere in greater or lesser manifestation. Make that one supreme, all-pervading spirit your ideal. Even after a little effort to realize him, you will see what fun it is. You will find in him an inexhaustible fountain of joy. You have seen enough of one side of life. Now see the other side, the real side. Knock and it shall be opened unto you. A veil is eluding the reality. Remove that veil and you will find him. If you will apply yourself to the attunement of this ideal, the whole world will be transformed for you. Disciple asking, Maharaj, what rules of diet should one follow? What rules of diet should one follow? Maharaj, that is a difficult question to answer. Men differ so widely in their constitutions that it is hardly possible to lay down any hard and fast rule about food. One kind of food may be agreeable to your constitution and yet do me harm. For this reason, the scriptures do not specifically advise any diet but only warn against rich foods. Disciple asking a question: should we avoid eating meat since it entails killing? Maharaj, nonsense. The Buddhists say harmlessness is the highest virtue. What does this mean? You can understand the significance of this only when you have attained samadhi, when you have reached enlightenment and have seen God in all creatures. Until then, mere talk is useless. When you can see the same God in the ant as in yourself, then you can practice this virtue. You may talk of not killing, but can you possibly avoid killing? What would you eat? Potatoes. Plant a potato underground. It shoots forth young sprouts. Has the potato no life? Would you eat rice? Plant the paddy grain in the earth. It grows into a rice plant. You want to drink water? Examine a drop of water under a microscope and see how many millions of tiny lives are there. You must breathe to live. Yet, with every breath you kill millions of creatures. Do you see any harm in that? You think you lose your religion if you take a little fish. Such arguments are foolish. The ancient Hindus held no such ideas. These are later Buddhist and Vaishnavite interpolations. So I end this video here. Next video will start page number 114. So thank you, my dear friends, for watching and listening this video with patience. Please like, comment and share the video and subscribe the channel. Thank you, my dear friends. Namaskar, 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 namaskar.